Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Unchain Your Data, an IT Leader's Guide to Escaping Information Silos in Highly Regulated Industries. So just to do some quick introductions, you've got myself, Lucy Pryor, on the call. I'm the Sales Director here at Mail Manager. We have Stephanie Faber, who's the Product Manager for Mail Manager, and finally, Tim Setchfield, Head of Collaboration Product for IdeaGen. So what are we going to be covering today? So we're going to start off talking about what the current information management landscape looks like across highly regulated industries and how digital tools and technology are actually shaping the industry. We'll then touch upon the limitations of current solutions like Microsoft 365, how to fit email management into your tech stack, and finally, how we can help you modernize your information management in-house, followed by a Q&A. So when it comes to technology, the most important thing to keep in mind is that outdated tools tend to lead to outdated results. And sticking with outdated tools means effectively getting left behind. Now, these systems create isolated pockets of information, which can make it really hard to get to what you need, and it tends to slow down the whole workflow, which is a problem because it means teams can't work together as smoothly or as quickly as they need to. So let's take a look into IT challenges in various highly regulated industries. Now, at the beginning of this year, IdeaGen Mail Manager ran a survey across different industries in heavily regulated environments all around the world. Now, the survey explored how collaboration solutions are used, the challenges faced with functionalities, and the level of trust in such existing solutions. So we surveyed 600 IT decision makers, with the majority of respondents coming from Europe and North America, focusing on sectors like aerospace and defense, government, healthcare, and many more. So what was our goal? Now, the goal of this survey was to understand how these organizations leverage collaboration tools, the challenges that they encounter, and what really drives their satisfaction and desire for improvement. So let's jump into the main findings of the report. Now, even though over 90% of organizations report successful IT implementations of collaboration tools, there are some key user behavior hurdles to address. For example, senior positions might bend the established rules for using the software, while older employees lacking proper training may not be utilizing it to its full potential. Data security is another concern. Nearly 3/4 of IT leaders worry about inconsistencies in data storage and security across various platforms. And interestingly, there's also a perception gap. Senior IT leaders often have different satisfaction levels with the collaboration solutions compared to mid-level managers and junior employees. And finally, despite these issues, many organizations are hesitant to switch collaboration tools altogether. So if we take a closer look at some of the key findings and challenges faced by end users, if we look at some of these stats on the screen, appreciate there's quite a lot on here, but you can see that a huge 71% of IT decision makers agree that end users typically bypass IT best practices just to get things done faster. Nearly 2/3 agreed that end users push back or struggle to adapt to new software implementations. This is something I certainly have heard a lot in my career here at Mail Manager. Gathering valuable feedback seems to be pretty difficult, with 71% agreeing that it's challenging getting user insights on new tools. And when it comes to issue resolution, 69% of respondents agree that tackling end user issues with new software can be a struggle. So what are some of the common, I suppose, concerns and drivers? So we found that organizations are typically grappling with several concerns surrounding data storage and security. 74% of respondents cite problems with managing a multitude of platforms for information sharing. Inconsistent methods for storing and sharing information create headaches for 72% of the respondents. And finding the document and data they need proves challenging for 70% of end users. So what actually prompts organizations to seek new collaboration tools? So the main drivers are to typically boost productivity and efficiency, meet regulatory needs, and concerns about employee stress. So what we'll do is turn it, I suppose, to the top priorities and desired benefits. Security reigns supreme. So 88% emphasizes the need to protect information from evolving threats. And finally, adaptability is key, with 57% valuing the ability of collaboration tools to adapt to changing needs and workflows. So if we switch a gear a little bit and now move on to a tool we're all familiar with, being email, some of the bane of our lives. Now, while many collaboration solutions offer significant potential, it's important to acknowledge the continued dominance of email. And despite the rise of these newer tools, email, it's safe to say, it's a central communication channel for most organizations. Now, for many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not often, I suppose, a consideration until things go wrong. And at the end of the day, they hold vital information that can normally mean the difference between winning and losing a potential dispute. So it really does need to be taken more seriously. Now, when it comes to IT leaders, 78% of those we've spoken to in the past are just stressed out, whether that's from management expectations and pressures, being challenged by internal stakeholders, or just working towards really tight project deadlines. And most of you on the webinar today can probably relate to needing to do excessive amounts of overtime just to keep up. And from our experience, IT are often the go-to when critical project information goes missing. So with so much digital change happening, it's really tough for IT leaders. And unfortunately, it often means that email management can be overlooked, even though it's super important. So Tim, over to you. What can be done?
Thanks, Lucy, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. Well, I think everyone's perspective on the use of digital tools and email management in particular will be different depending on when your experience started. If you started like I did back in the 90s, or even if you started just now in your roles, you'll be experiencing challenges about what tools to use and where to store your data. For example, what to do with emails given their volume, their repetition, and yet their importance has been a problem that goes back many years. And I definitely agree with your comment, Lucy, about emails being the bane of our lives at times, but still very useful. Back in 2002, the tools that existed really just represented projects and other locations as email addresses that you could forward to and copy, which wasn't very optimal. Now much better tools exist. Some of this webinar is focused on email, but first let's look at some more general topics in digital tools and how we can use them to unchain your data and break down the barriers that keep information isolated. Next slide, please. To succeed as software vendors, we have to provide obvious reasons for you as stakeholders to move away from not just paper, but also from growing your own solutions from Office applications and other generic tools, to move from those to specific tools that are purpose-built and move from paper through digital towards being more systematic. The evolution of the way that we're handling data, as we've become more aware of it and developed more systems, has led to a lot of data in organizations being digitally fractured, with data existing in silos. In other words, data is spread across many different applications and environments. Most organizations have terabytes of data that could be deleted, but the data is not in a structure that would allow this delicate task to even be considered. To succeed in the context of your industry in highly regulated industries with significant compliance challenges, the need for good data structure is obvious, whether you're proving the adherence to your standards or just trying to efficiently follow a documented process. Document collaboration tools for sharing and for basic co-editing are now table stakes in many organizations, with the main unanswered questions being how to structure the tool and how to arrange the access. But email often presents unanswered challenges. We're all on our personal and organizational journey in a digital evolution based on when we started and our particular roles, trying to future-proof what we do, trying to decide what tools to adopt to ensure we're efficient and that we can meet the demands of compliance and standards. We're going to look at this in a little bit more detail, but before we can continue, let's move to the next slide and have a quick poll.
Thanks, Tim. That's really interesting. So as Tim mentioned, we're going to trigger a quick poll. So if that can get triggered now, that should be on your screen. So we're keen to understand, where do you primarily store your organization's data? Is it file servers, network drives, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, Dropbox, Google Drive, or local hard drives? Okay, so we've got quite a few coming in. Okay, so lots of SharePoint. We're definitely seeing more of a push towards that in terms of where our clients are typically storing data. Okay. Excellent. All right, we'll share the results after the session, but that's really interesting to see. So thank you for taking part in that. I'm going to hand it back over to Tim.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'll be interested to see those results afterwards. To continue to look a bit more deeply into email, there'll be a number of challenges you're facing if you're trying to adapt your systems that you have to handle email. It's very hard to get a consistent approach just considering the storage of email. We're all autonomous in the behavior that we apply to our inbox, and don't forget our sent items. Without a specific system, where do you put your emails? How do you store them, and in what format? As Lucy mentioned before, senior people in businesses have the tendency to be able to apply pressure to change standards. And one of those things that can happen is that mailbox sizes that are allowed in a business can be pressed up in terms of because of time pressure. And many people spend most of their time with their mailboxes pushed right up against those limits. We also have no way to access other people's emails that could help us in many ways in projects and other activities, emails that we would be perfectly entitled to see to benefit and help the company and the work that we're doing, but there's no real way to access those. We might have implemented strong collaboration tools for other kinds of content, but it's very normal for email to be excluded from this, despite the fact that it's normally the most useful content when looking for precedents or for legal defense. Considering what Microsoft can offer us here, what about Microsoft 365? Let's have a quick look at this tool set on the next slide. Fueled partly by the pandemic, which saw a huge increase in the use of SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams for document storage, sharing, and co-editing, Microsoft have been capitalizing on the latest move around worker flexibility. All of this is very much to the benefit of team working. We use Microsoft 365 in our business. We use Teams. We use SharePoint for storing documents. And in many businesses, choosing Teams or SharePoint as the central storage location is the obvious choice, though it still gives you that problem of how to structure the product and what permissions to apply. Despite these great features, there's no easy way to manage email in these systems. And also, the increased use of chat through Teams adds something else that needs to be governed. This is something that we've got our eye on, and we're starting to address. There is no philosophical difference between a chat that decides a fundamental decision or an email that does the same, and both need to be recorded. So even if you are using Microsoft 365 for document storage, there are limitations. And aside from this, you may not be happy to store your data on the Microsoft cloud. So let's look a bit more at email management in the context of being flexible about storage locations. Next slide, please. The fashion among in the evolution of software in years previously and up to now has been to move away from large-scale enterprise solutions to best-of-breed point solutions. This move has partly been fueled by the advent of strong integration availability between platforms that allow the systems to integrate with each other and be more seamless. These solutions should also be rapid to deploy and allow you to gain benefits from them very quickly, and should work with your own policies, environments, and relevant regulations. Yesterday's approach revolved around huge solutions that try to do more and more in your business. These quickly get unwieldy, very hard to support and implement, and they're difficult for software vendors to keep up to date. It's also fairly typical for such large solutions to have redundant features that you're paying for but you don't need. Thinking about implementing strong and well-integrated point solutions, and considering that handling email may still be a significant challenge and threat to your business. This brings us to an exciting turning point in today's webinar. Over to you, Lucy, to talk about the experience of implementing Mail Manager.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. So now we've spoken a bit about how vital it is to integrate email management into your tech stack. We're going to be touching upon the dynamic capabilities of IdeaGen Mail Manager and how it fits into this puzzle. So I can see some familiar names on this webinar. So a lot of you have probably either seen Mail Manager or certainly heard of it. But if not, we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So let's start with talking about the key features. Now, Mail Manager over the last year has developed last few years, I should say, has developed a powerful and robust search, which allows users to find any email across any of their projects, literally within a few clicks, using key metadata from an email. So from an end user's point of view, it has also recently undergone a facelift using new technology. So it makes it much easier for that end user when they're navigating the software. There's a key feature in it, which is the difference between staff filing and not filing, which is our filing prompt, which slots really nicely into a user's workflow. It gets staff filing, most importantly, from the minute it's installed, after probably years and years, which we get told of trying to get staff to file manually. Now, we get questioned about, well, what do we do with our old data? It's sat here or here. How do we kind of access it? Now, many of our customers naturally have emails stored in legacy places. So we've got a fantastic tool to actually migrate those messages so that they can be searched again and when needed to, I suppose, through Mail Manager's search feature. And lastly, another customer favorite is how quick this tool is to deploy. Now, from an installation perspective, Mail Manager can be set up literally within an hour and pushed out to users after their training. So it's super light touch and requires very little resource. So what makes me the most excited about Mail Manager is really how quickly you start seeing the benefits. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these and bore you, but just to pick out, I suppose, three that really stand out the most to me. The first is data ownership. Now, we never hold your data. There's a lot of systems out there that do, and it's an absolute nightmare to remove it. All Mail Manager's doing is simply bridging the gap between Outlook and where you as a business want to store and centralize that data. And the permissions to those destinations are also respected. So you don't need to be concerned about having to set more permissions up for users. Secondly, it's reducing the size of inboxes. Now, we always hear from IT that staff, their users, I suppose, are at their capacity and wondering why their Outlook's crashing or why IT have to put in retention policies. Now, with Mail Manager, we free up storage space by automatically archiving old emails, meaning you no longer have to kind of nag employees to do this and get things moved. And finally, managing risk. The impact of the power of this tool is always felt when you're in a stressful situation and you need to find that one killer email from someone that's normally left the company. Often this rests with IT admin to give someone access to the user's mailbox to kind of find that email. So because of the power of the search and the visibility and control that users have on a project, finding emails is no longer a stress effectively. You've got everything at your fingertips. So just to summarize, key things is Mail Manager is extremely easy to deploy. Administrators can manage and control the settings, and Mail Manager supports a host of protocols for filing and searching. So Steph, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thanks, Luz. So on to a little bit more of the technical aspects. So essentially, I'll just pick out a couple of these to talk to today. The first one I want to talk about is licensing. So Mail Manager licenses against the primary email address, and we also have our account manager portal that we essentially allow administrators to use, and that gives a really nice holistic view about who's using the software, when they last used it, and that you can see their kind of their email address on there. So it allows for you to have a much stricter management on who's using the software and understand how the software is being used within the business. So that's a massive benefit. A second thing I want to touch on this slide is the managing of the filing locations. So as Lucy mentioned, an hour within implementation and all of your users can be up and running. Most of the time that's thanks to what we call auto discovery. So what auto discovery is a way for Mail Manager to essentially find all of those locations in the protocol of your choice automatically. That means that after configuration, you can then deploy settings and files that will waterfall down into all of your users. So this kind of talks a little bit into the user preferences and security. But essentially what you can do is deploy certain settings, and then a user will essentially, upon installation of Mail Manager, have their auto discovery running, and that will find all of the locations that that user has access to. And that's true for each user. So I might have locations that might appear for me that I have access to that Tim and Lucy don't have access to. So it makes the use case of Mail Manager really nice and easy for that end user, because you've got the prompt that's coming up. It's telling them, this is where you should be filing your email, and then you've got all of the locations that they have access to, and it's as easy as that. So what we are kind of alluding to is it's almost, it seems as easy as 1, 2, 3. So that's what we love about Mail Manager. In terms of how we differ from other solutions, I would probably allude to the migration piece first. So Luce mentioned earlier the batch migration. So we've essentially got 3 methods in which we assist with that kind of legacy movement of your old information, or your information sitting in Outlook into your location of choice. And we can support batch filing of emails that are sitting on the Exchange Online servers into SharePoint. And that's what we call our batch cloud filer. We have, which we've just recently launched, our PST filer. So that's essentially a method for you to either per PST file map to your Outlook, or PST files, a folder of PST files on your local PC, or a CSV file that contains a list of PSTs to different various locations. You can then migrate all of that data in one go. And then the third is our file all messages in a folder tool. And that essentially sits within the context of Outlook and allows users to select a folder that has a bunch of emails that typically are related to a single project, and choose a single location to file those emails to. So those 3 tools allow that, that next step of closing the gap between the emails that you have sitting in your inbox and where they need to be once Mail Managers hit the ground. So that's what's great about that. And then touching on the low touch interface. So Mail Manager has a very advanced method of suggesting those locations to users. So we have a prompt, and we essentially have a method where we use the information, the metadata of the email to suggest locations. 9 times out of 10, the first location on the list is what users where they expect to file their email, where they should file their email. So having the prompt, having the ability to migrate your emails, and our powerful search, yeah, it all kind of points to a fine solution. Next, I want to touch on a bit of the trends and where the industry is kind of moving. So a lot of these things, I'm sure you would have kind of touched on or seen. So I'll just pick a few on here. So cloud-based collaboration. So Tim earlier mentioned the pandemic and how that kind of shifted everyone into this 365 environment and being online. Most companies are kind of working towards this cloud collaboration, making it easy to work within a team that's kind of global. You've got e-signature and digital documentation. So how easily can we share important information, get people to sign things without actually needing to print a piece of paper off? You're seeing kind of the robotic processes and things like that coming in to help people, reduce human error. AI, machine learning, of course, that's a very hot topic at the moment. And all of these technologies that we're seeing coming into the industry are trying to achieve the same goal, and that's maintain control and save people time. And that's the same goal that's true for Mail Manager. So specifically, changes coming into Microsoft. So this slide is kind of all about those changes. So new Outlook wanting to replace the legacy, mail apps, calendar apps, people apps. So that's started. I'm sure most of you would have seen that little toggle to switch to new Outlook. We've got Copilot. So again, a hot topic of conversation happening within the Microsoft ecosystem, and how that can essentially help users, what's the word, type their emails out and assist you with a whole bunch of things in your workflow. And then that speaks to new Outlook features and Copilot. So how this all fits in to the puzzle of this new technology and innovation. So where does Mail Manager fit into all of this, and how are we developing our roadmap to accommodate for all of these changes happening in the industry? Tim mentioned earlier about how we're trying to kind of close that loop between correspondence. So Mail Manager wants to be the go-to product to save your correspondence. And with all of these changes happening in the industry, we've also got to consider the other platforms that people use to communicate with each other, share important information, documentation, and that's Teams. So in the next slide, you'll see a section on our roadmap for our Teams chat filer. So our Teams chat filer is in preview at the moment, and essentially what it does is it allows you to select messages that are sitting within Teams and file them to existing Mail Manager locations. So those locations, because they're existing Mail Manager locations, those messages can then be found at a later stage using the Mail Manager search. So again, it's closing that loop and ensuring that wherever possible, Mail Manager can help you save important correspondence. The second block you'll see is to do with our web add-in. So this is a feature or a new application that we're introducing that allows you to use Mail Manager, again, filing to 365 locations, and essentially use Mail Manager within the new Outlook space. So in terms of our roadmap and where we are at with these products, so the first is the classic Outlook. So I mentioned earlier about the support for batch filing. So that's just come now in this last release, and that essentially allows you to batch file PST files. It's a feature that many prospects and many of our existing customers have wanted. So we're excited to be able to launch that. In terms of migration, so we've now also just been able to launch the support for uploading multiple shared mailboxes with our batch cloud filer tool. So basically what that means is that instead of kind of choosing one shared mailbox at a time, you can now upload multiple to the batch cloud filer and trigger off a process, and that can just kind of go off in the background and do its thing and file to your SharePoint locations. So that's quite a big win for us. In terms of the add-in for New Outlook, again, with this release, we've essentially released what I would kind of call a hybrid between Classic Outlook and New Outlook. And this is our first step to allowing users to be within the ecosystem of New Outlook, still on a Windows PC, but enabling users to file to non-SharePoint locations, meaning that these are all of the other protocols that we support. So file server, for example, or ProjectWise. Then on to the third, so the app for Teams. So the preview released quite a few number of months ago. We have now done improvements based on user feedback, and that's now just ready to launch as well. In terms of what's coming, so our focus is very much on New Outlook and where our focus will be for the future. So we want to be able to take user feedback and improve our file system filing and that kind of workflow. And then in terms of our app for Teams, essentially what we're aiming to do is to be able to launch the Mail Manager search from that Teams application. So you would be in an environment where you're in Teams, you have filed your email, but now you want to actually open the search direct from there. So this would allow you to do that. Then onto the next slide. So what is in Mail Manager's future? Of course, we would love to include AI into our search. So if you can imagine, there would be a search window and you could ask, a chat bot to say, show me the emails from myself and Lucy over the past 3 months that contain the word pillar, and it will bring up those 3 emails that I know that are relevant. In terms of the add-in for Outlook, so we would love to allow users to use the web add-in on a mobile. So Mail Manager does have a mobile app at the moment, but users like to stay within the confines of Outlook. So, bringing that ability in there, and message tracking. So if you can imagine Lucy sending me an email and she's already filed it to a location, by the time it hits my inbox, I want to be able to know that that's already filed, so I don't need to worry about that. So that's kind of what we mean by message tracking. So that would be great. And then for the app for Teams, automated filing. So users often are in the environment of Teams and they have a Teams channel that we know is related to X project. How cool would it be if we could literally click a button on a UI that says, I want to file all of the correspondence from this channel, and something just goes off and does that filing for you. So that's what we envision for that. And that's also something that's come up from conversations that we've had with users in the early stages of the Teams chat filer discussions. So it's an important milestone for us that we are very, very keen to hit. So yeah, and then I think that's it from me, and we are ready for questions.
Hi, Steph. Yes, thank you so much for going through that. Super exciting. I'll be keeping the pressure on to see when it's coming out. So yeah, excited to see that. So thank you everyone for obviously coming on. We've got loads of questions coming through. I'm just going to pick maybe the kind of top 5 just because I'm cautious of time. But just to start with, and Tim, I'll hand this one over to you. Someone's asked, how does Mail Manager manage permissions?
So one of the strengths of Mail Manager is that it's agnostic about where emails are being stored. We store the emails into the locations and the systems that you're using, and we respect the security that is set in those systems. So if you have a confidential project, for example, or if you have a project that represents maybe HR as an internal department and you file emails into those sensitive locations, only those people who have got access to those locations will be able to search the emails in those locations. That's just how the software works.
Amazing. Thanks, Tim. I think that hopefully that was clear for everyone. And Steph, over to you. What happens with duplicate emails?
I'm muted, Steph.
Steph, I think you're hang on 2 seconds. You might need to do it manually on there. Well, while Steph's doing that, Tim, I'll hand it over to you for this question again.
Okay, sure, no problem. So if two people attempt to file the very same email into the same location, they'll both proceed, and what will happen is only one copy of that email will be kept. So the system just makes sure that you economize on storage. Our goal with Mail Manager is to make the storing of email as streamlined as possible, not to give you loads of messages, and just let you file, and we'll deal with any duplicates in the background.
Sounds pretty simple. Thank you, Tim. I don't know if we've got Steph back. If not, I'll answer this one. Where are emails, or where can you file to using Mail Manager? Steph, have we got you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, okay. So where are emails filed to Mail Manager? So that's essentially based on what locations you have access to. So it depends on the protocol that you choose. So Mail Manager supports a number of protocols, namely ProjectWise, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, file servers. So we support a host of locations, and that means that when you go through the implementation process of Mail Manager with our implementation teams, we essentially assist you to get all of those locations set up, and essentially Mail Manager will make a copy of that information and put it in the location of the user's choice. So yeah, we just move those emails over.
Perfect. Thank you, Steph. I'll fire one more over to you. Is all user access to the service authenticated and encrypted? Is there any MFA?
Yes. So essentially, when a user signs, well, and gets the application installed onto their PC, any locations that require access, the user will basically authenticate into that. So if I have a location in SharePoint, Mail Manager will ask you who you are, and will store that token. That token can get refreshed on its own, and it keeps it up to date. And then at some point in time, it'll ask you to sign in again. So we do store that information. Any data that's moving around is obviously encrypted. So yeah, we do support that. Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. I mean, we're getting another one on SharePoint. So if you're happy to take this, is metadata pulled through into SharePoint? How does that work?
Yes, so we have the option to pull metadata into SharePoint. So with Mail Manager and our new web add-in, there's an option to essentially allow us to populate metadata in SharePoint that allows you to access the SharePoint search. And what that means is that when you file an email into SharePoint, Mail Manager will automatically populate the metadata associated to that email into SharePoint columns, and then users can use the SharePoint search and essentially find the information attached to that.
Super. Okay, thank you. Tim, one for you. How does Mail Manager manage changes to its service, like updates and new features? That's come up a couple of times.
There's really two options of deploying Mail Manager. You can have an auto update option where Mail Manager is installed, and once it's installed, then the system will automatically check for updates, and we update about once a quarter. As soon as the new update is available, it will be installed automatically, probably the least time consuming from your point of view. If you want to keep control of exactly when the software is released, then we can also offer an MSI every release, which you can download and choose when you apply it to your system.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Tim. I'm going to take one more question, which I'll quickly cover off, and this comes up lots. So when people leave the business, will we still have access to all emails they've received? Absolutely. The whole value of Mail Manager is that rather than stuff that's staying siloed in inboxes, they're getting moved to the project folder on your server or SharePoint, which others in the business have access to. So absolutely, you'll have access to that information. So just being cautious of the time, there's still a couple of questions. We might answer some offline, but thank you all so much for joining the webinar today. If you've got any further questions, please feel free to contact us. Details should be showing on the screen in a moment, or reach out through the website, and we're more than happy to do a personalized demonstration for you. But thanks again, and I hope it was useful.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.